Imagine a steel leviathan weighing 48,000 tons. This is the famous Aquila submarine, the largest in the world. It weighs as much as a huge parking lot filled with heavy tanks. Drop a nut from that tank into the water. It'll sink faster than you can blink. But this giant, as tall as a 9-story building, doesn't just hang in the water. It maneuvers, hides, and carries energy inside that could wipe a small country off the map. Common sense protests. Intuition screams, metal should sink, period. But engineers made it float. Humans have always wanted to peer into the abyss. For centuries, it was considered the domain of the suicidal. 4th century BC. Alexander the Great, according to legend, descends underwater in a glass barrel. A beautiful myth, but physics was against him. London, early 17th century. Dutchman Cornelius Drebbel launches a strange leather monster on the Thames. A wooden frame covered in oiled leather, with oars sticking out through cuffs. Spectators on the shore are horrified. They expect the barrel to fill with water and become a coffin for the mad inventor. But the vessel disappears underwater and resurfaces elsewhere. Drebbel proved, down there you can breathe and move. Later, during the American War of Independence, David Bushnell creates the turret. All these attempts had one thing in common. They were fragile, wooden toys. A modern submarine is the ultimate triumph of technology over the brute force of the ocean. And to understand how it works, we have to go back to a naked Greek in a bathtub. Syracuse, 3rd century BC. Mathematician Archimedes sits in a bath and sees water spilling over the edge. At that moment, he realizes his body has become lighter. Legend says he ran out into the street shouting, "Eureka!" What did he understand? It's simple. When you immerse yourself in water, you displace it with your body. The water resists and pushes you back up. This is buoyant force. In the ocean, there's always a tug of war. Gravity pulls everything down towards the Earth's center. Buoyant force pushes everything up towards the sun. Why does a steel ball weighing 100 grams sink? Because it's small and dense. It displaces very little water, about 10 grams. Gravity easily wins, 100 against 10. The ball sinks. Now let's take that same metal and roll it into a huge thin sheet. Roll it into a tube, weld the ends. You get an empty barrel. Inside is air. Now this structure occupies a huge volume. It displaces tons of water. The weight of the displaced water becomes greater than the weight of the metal itself. Water beats gravity. It needs a third state. It shouldn't float or sink. It should hover in the water, like a blimp in the sky. This is called neutral buoyancy. This is a state of delicate balance. The boat must weigh exactly as much as the water it displaces with its hull. Gram for gram. But how do you make a huge ship change its weight right in the middle of the ocean? You can't just throw the engine overboard to get lighter, can you? Nature came up with the answer millions of years ago. Fish use a swim bladder. Engineers looked at fish and created tanks. Inside, a submarine is like a matryoshka doll. There's an inner pressure hull. This is the airtight capsule where people live, instruments work, and a no smoking sign hangs. And outside is the light hull. A beautiful, streamlined shell. The space between them isn't empty. It's filled with huge cavities, main ballast tanks. These are the lungs of the ship. In surfaced position, the tanks are full of air. The boat is light, like an empty plastic bottle. It has reserve buoyancy. But then the siren sounds. The command, emergency dive. Mechanics open the ventilation valves at the top. Air rushes out with a wild whistle. From below, through special openings, the ocean rushes into the tanks. The boat rapidly to hover at the desired depth. Mechanics play with the weight with precision. They use trim tanks. Pump in a bucket of water, the boat goes down. Pump out a cup, it stops in place. This is that very neutral buoyancy. And how to surface? After all, at a depth of 300 meters, water presses from outside with monstrous force. It won't just flow out of the tanks by itself. This is where brute force comes into play. Compressed air. On board are cylinders where air is compressed at 400 atmospheres. This is explosive energy, locked in metal. The command, blow ballast. Compressed air rushes into the tanks like an enraged beast. It acts like a piston, forcefully pushing the water back into the ocean. The boat instantly becomes light and pops to the surface like a cork. In an emergency ascent, the submarine literally leaps out of the water like a dolphin, raising a cloud of spray. The system is simple, like all genius things. But it only works as long as the hull is intact, and the ocean really wants to crush it. Water seems soft, but that's an illusion. Dive to the bottom of a pool, your ears will pop. That's water pressure. On land, we live under a pressure of 1 atmosphere. We're comfortable, but every 10 meters of depth adds another atmosphere on top. The weight of the air column above your head is replaced by the weight of a lead plate. Modern combat down there, every square centimeter of the hull is pressed by a weight of 60 kilograms. Imagine an adult standing on your thumbnail. Now imagine such people covering every millimeter of the hull. The ocean squeezes the boat with a force of millions of tons, trying to turn it into a crushed beer can. That's why you'll never see a square submarine. Corners are death. Pressure will break them first. The ideal shape is a sphere. Bathyscaphs for the Mariana Trench are made round, but a combat submarine is a warehouse of missiles, torpedoes, and bunks for 100 sailors. Living in a sphere is inconvenient. Engineers got clever. They stretched the sphere into a cylinder and capped it with hemispheres. The result is a cigar shape. A cylinder perfectly withstands radial pressure. But shape alone isn't enough. You need material. The pressure hull is the heart of the submarine. It's welded from special steel up to 8 centimeters thick. In the Soviet Union, they went even further. In the 60s, engineers created submarines from titanium. Titanium is as light as aluminum and as strong as the best armor. Titanium golden fish dived deeper than anyone and were faster than torpedoes. But they cost a fortune, so now steel rules the world again. The scariest thing at depth is the sounds. Experienced, and the metal starts to sing, creaking and groaning, resisting the monstrous embrace of the ocean. We've created a fortress that doesn't burst. Now we need to make it move where there's no air. Any engine, from a lawnmower to a Ferrari engine, works on one principle: fuel plus spark plus oxygen. At depth, there's no oxygen. There's nowhere to get it. For the first 100 years, submarines were more like divers. They traveled on the surface on diesel engines, roaring like tractors, and charged huge batteries. They dived underwater briefly, to attack or hide. There, in silence, electric motors worked. But the battery charge lasted for an hour of fast travel, or a day of crawling. As soon as the battery ran out, the commander had to surface. And on the surface, enemy destroyers and planes were already waiting. A motor was needed that didn't care about air. 1954. The USA launches the Nautilus, the first nuclear submarine in the world. This changed everything. A nuclear reactor is essentially a very complex kettle. Uranium decays and releases a wild amount of heat. This heat boils water. Steam under enormous pressure hits a turbine. The turbine spins the propeller. No combustion, no oxygen. A piece of uranium the size of a fist gives as much, but a powerful motor creates a new problem: speed. When the propeller spins too fast, the water on its blades literally boils. Thousands of bubbles form and immediately burst. This is called cavitation. For an enemy's acoustician, it sounds like a rockfall in the mountains. The submarine becomes noisy and noticeable. That's why the shape of propellers is a closely guarded state secret. They're covered with shrouds while the boat is in dock, and the most modern submarines have abandoned propellers altogether. They use water jets, quiet pumps hidden inside the hull. So, we travel fast and long. But where to? The ocean is as dark as a basement, and GPS doesn't work underwater. Imagine, you're blindfolded, put behind the wheel, and asked to drive through the center of Moscow during rush hour. That's roughly how submariners operate. At a depth of 100 meters, eternal night. Radio waves die instantly in salt water. Your smartphone there is just a brick. GPS doesn't work. But water has one advantage. It conducts sound excellently, 5 times better than air. So, a submarine sees with its ears. The main tool is sonar or hydrolocator. There are 2 ways to look. First, passive. This is the ninja mode. The boat sneaks in complete silence, and its sensitive microphones listen to the ocean. An acoustician is a person with a unique hearing. An experienced acoustician can say from 50 kilometers away, "That's a Russian destroyer, moving slowly, with a faulty bearing on the left shaft." Second, active. This is the spotlight mode. The boat sends out a powerful sound pulse, the famous ping. The sound hits a rock or another boat and returns as an echo. The computer draws an accurate map. But there's a problem. Turning on active sonar, you're shouting to the whole ocean, "I'm here." The enemy will hear you long before you see him. That's why combat submarines almost always stay silent. But sonar only sees what's around. How do you know where you are on the world map? This is where inertial navigation comes in. It's a complex system of gyroscopes. The computer remembers the starting point, the pier in Murmansk, and then it counts every movement. Turned right, accelerated, traveled 3 miles, turned left. It adds up millions of these micro steps and draws the route. However, even a supercomputer makes mistakes. After a week of sailing, the error can be a couple of kilometers. So sometimes the boat has to surface to periscope depth, quickly raise the antenna, catch a satellite, clarify coordinates, and dive again. We know where to go. But who controls this monster? People. And they need something to breathe. A submarine is the worst place for a claustrophobic. 100 people are locked in a steel tube for 90 days. There are no windows, no fresh breeze, no way out. The boat doesn't carry a supply of oxygen in cylinders. You can't stock enough for 3 months. It makes air itself, right from the ocean. Special installations take seawater and split it into hydrogen and oxygen with electricity. Oxygen goes into the compartments, hydrogen goes overboard, and the carbon dioxide we exhale is absorbed by chemical filters. The local air is sterile but smells specific, a mix of heated metal, oil, and ozone. The second problem is water. There are billions of tons of water around, but you can't drink it. Desalination units boil seawater with reactor heat, turning it into steam, then into distillate. Drinking such water is harmful. It leaches salts from the body, so minerals are artificially added to it. But water is still rationed. A sailor's shower, once a week. The famous bath day. The third problem is food and psyche. Submariners are fed better than anyone in the army. Red caviar, chocolate, natural juices, smoked fish. On Russian boats, even 50 grams of red wine a day is allowed, for digestion. This isn't luxury. Food here is the main entertainment and antidepressant. The concepts of day and night don't exist. There are only shifts. To prevent people from going crazy and mixing up the time of day, the lighting is changed. Bright white light means it's daytime on the surface. Dim blue or red means night. And the most delicate question: the toilet. At depth, the pressure outside will push everything back into the room with wild force. A complex valve system is used. First, waste goes into a tank. Then the tank is sealed, and compressed air shoots the contents into the sea. A mistake in the sequence of opening valves can be costly. There have been cases in history where a wrong flush led to flooding compartments. But what if the equipment fails? What if the boat lies on the bottom? Submariners have a toast. May the number of surfacings equal the number of dives. But sometimes the ocean wins. If the boat lies on the seabed, the crew has two options. Option 1, wet. This is desperation. Sailors put on rescue suits, climb into a torpedo tube or airlock, flood it with water, and open the outer hatch. A person shoots to the surface like a cork. But this only works at shallow depths, up to 100 meters. Deeper, decompression sickness will kill faster than sharks. Nitrogen in the blood will boil like soda. Option 2, dry. Wait for help. A rescue ship will lower a bathyscaphe that sucks onto the submarine's hatch, and people will transfer into it without getting wet. But there's a unique solution too. On many Russian submarines, like the Yasin, there's a floating escape chamber. The entire crew enters a special but the future of the submarine fleet looks different. It will be quiet and unmanned. Why risk people? Why waste energy on oxygen, food, and toilets? Robots don't breathe. They don't get tired. They don't need to write letters home. Unmanned submarines are already being created. Giant drones, like the Poseidon. They can sleep on the seabed for years, waiting for a command. They're covered with smart skin that absorbs any sonar sounds, engines without propellers, on magnetic thrust, absolutely silent. Maybe in 50 years, the profession of submariner will become as historical as the profession of a stoker on a steam locomotive. And in the depths, only the shadows of robots will glide, playing their invisible war games. But until that happens, living people continue to go on missions, locking the heavy hatch behind them. Because no artificial